Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do an episode on the economics, the financial impacts of starting your own food forest. Stick around. One of the most frequent questions that I get asked is, how much does this all cost? And right up front, I want to make sure that it's clear that a food forest doesn't cost you money, a food forest makes you money. Now that being said, it does cost money to get started. So we're going to talk about upfront costs, we're going to talk about income streams, and then we're also going to talk about ROI, which is the amount of time it takes you to use your income streams in order to recoup your initial cost. That's the most important thing, because once you've recouped your initial cost, you've literally just created a free passive income stream in your life. And let me just say that there are a few secrets to creating financial independence in your life, and one of the most important is to create free passive income streams. Now this video is not going to be geared towards someone who's buying 100 acres and planting thousands of fruit trees. What I'm going to focus this video on instead is where most people are in their journeys, and it's not what I have here. Most people are living in small footprints, and they just want to know the financial aspects of if they were to create a food forest in their backyard or maybe even on their front lawn. Now, one of the things that you're going to have to adapt to is the fact that none of this, unfortunately, these days is normal. Most people are not creating food orchards on their front lawn. In fact, most of society thinks that in order to be a good neighbor, the number one requirement is to have a pristine looking lawn with no weeds in it. That makes someone a good neighbor who takes care of their property. Some of us don't have much space at all. Some don't have any land whatsoever. So you might have to get creative for where you plant this garden. It might have to be similar to one of my videos called No Land, No Problem. If you have no land, make sure you check that video out. It doesn't mean that you can't start your own little food forest. It just means that you won't technically own the land that it's on. But it also might mean that you're planting your food forest right by the street, and a lot of people are going to think that you're a weirdo. But when society is collectively running towards the edge of a cliff, the person running in the opposite direction is seen as having lost their mind. I have no doubt that my entire family thought I was completely insane when I was planting out my food forest. In fact, I'm pretty sure I know they did. But the thing is now I have so much food coming in and I've created such abundance on my property that actually I think if I ever wanted to sell this land, it would be very, very easy for me to find the right buyer who would value what I've done here. And it goes back to the core principle that plants are one of the most appreciating assets on planet Earth. A seed is worth pennies. A tiny little 1-year-old stick is worth $2 to $5. A 3 to 5 year old tree is worth anywhere from $50 to $150, $200, and a mature tree is literally priceless. So what you're doing on your land is going to generate you money, not only in the food that you're going to be saving that you're not buying anymore, but it's also going to be generating you money in the appreciation of whatever land that you're planting it on. So that is enough about that. I really think I'm hammering in the fact that a food forest does not cost you money. However, it does in the first year. So let's talk about how much that costs to install, how much work it is, and roughly how long it takes until you're going to get some repayment for that action. Now, a lot of the actual numbers in this video are going to drastically depend on the current economic situation where you are located. All my numbers are going to be in Canadian dollars, and they're going to be based on the economic realities of what the nurseries around me are selling their plants for. I'll also include tips for how you can reduce the cost of install of your food forest, but at the same time, remember, the upfront cost, minimizing that should be the last thing that you think about. The most important thing is for you to think long term. So while you might think that it's a good idea to save $100 on a fruit tree, what's actually more important is that you get a good variety that will grow well in your area and will produce long term. Because just think about, you're going to be taking the fruit off that tree, you're going to be collecting seeds and pits, and you're going to be planting those things for more trees for free. Even if you are filling your whole area, you can still create a really nice side income business by just planting the pits of the trees that grow well in your area and selling those at the end of your driveway. So it's really important that you're doing that with the best genetics possible, and that means sometimes it's not always a smart idea to cheap out on a tree. You want to do the thing that makes sense in the long term. Another really important aspect is going to be planting density and your strategy for that. Typically, I think roughly this density here is what you generally want, and it's going to be surprising that there's actually multiple trees, overstory trees that you're looking at. They're just not developed yet. There's roughly 4 overstory trees here in around a 100 square foot block. So that's like a 10 by 10 grid, maybe like a 12 by 8, something like that. You're going to want to have roughly 2 to 4 overstory trees in that area, and then you're going to want to have 3 times as many bushes as that. You're going to want to have 3 times as many herbaceous layer plants as bushes, and then you're going to want to have ground covers everywhere. Now the other option could be to go for something more like this, where we have an overstory tree here, an overstory tree there, and yes, I do have a walking path through there. If this was against a fence, you wouldn't have that walking path. You would have this filled in with bushes. But roughly that distance there, which I think is around 16 feet. So you could put your trees at 16-foot centers instead of, say, 10, 8-foot centers, something like that. And this way you're planting in a density that will be looking towards what the final planting density should be. But at the same time, your yield in the beginning years is going to be reduced. If I were personally doing it, I would spend extra money and I would get another tree in that middle area between those so that I'm getting production. And as the trees grow, I can prune each tree to kind of get away from the others, maintain as much sunlight as possible. And that also leaves me the flexibility that if one of those 3 trees died, for example, I can still have 2. I like to typically plant roughly double as many trees as I'm going to want in my final planting density. So that is going to increase the amount of cost that it costs you to get started up. But I think it's the better play, because the real limiting thing in this is really your time. And you don't really want to get 7 years down the road, have one of your trees die and have to start fresh. So looking at this linden tree guild here, we basically have a linden as the overstory. We've got arguably 4 bushes, a cherry, 2 sea buckthorn, and raspberry planted in and around it. So that's kind of like 4 bushes, but yeah, really 3 bushes are fine around each tree. And the interesting thing about using this rule of 3s is that typically bushes will cost 1/3 of what trees cost, and herbaceous layer plants will cost 1/3 of what a bush costs. So that basically means that you take your tree cost and you triple it. That'll give you a rough idea of what it's going to cost you to flesh out the rest of that guild. And that would be for the cost of roughly a 6-foot tree, like a full-size tree. So if that goes for around $120 in your local store, then triple that. You're looking at about $360 to do the small little guild in and around that one tree. For us here, trees are roughly this size, like this peach. If you get them bare root, which you should, make sure you're checking out my other videos as well on ways that you should be buying your plants. But bare root trees, roughly this size, they're going to cost anywhere from around $45 to about $70, $80. So to set up a guild like that, you're looking at somewhere around $200, between $150 and $200. Now, in terms of generating money, It's important to know that the trees will have longer ROIs, but they'll have a higher cap per square foot. Stuff like on the other opposite of the spectrum, strawberry plants as a ground cover, they'll have a very quick ROI, but they'll have a limited cap on how much money per square foot they'll actually create in the long term. And I think that's pretty evident through my recent videos on peaches. If you look about the amount of money that the peach, if I were to sell my peaches at even $1 or $1.50 per peach, which is roughly what I could sell them for here, especially organic, locally grown peaches, let's just say $1 per peach. This tree here put out around, I want to say $500 to $1,000 worth of peaches this year, whereas there's no way that this equal size footing of a strawberry patch put out anywhere near that. However, the strawberries cost me $1 per strawberry plant, and I bought like 6 plants and they turned into this. And the peach tree, I spent, I think $59 on a bare root peach tree 4 years ago. So it took some time for the peach tree to pay itself back, but now it's producing, you know, $800-ish every single year. Obviously, depending on the year, sometimes we'll get none at all. So if you want to average that out to around $200 a year, roughly, profit for a peach tree compared to strawberry plants that are going to put out at least a half of that, maybe a third. And then there's the intermediate things like the bushes that balance between the two. They cost a little more. They take a little longer to produce, not as long as a tree, but not as quick as a strawberry that'll produce the year that you buy it. But they're a little slower, so they're like a medium balance between the two. You can get bushes for anywhere from $5 to $20 a bush, and that's about 1/3 of the cost of a tree of the same relative size. Now, planting in a polyculture like this is good because it helps blend those two aspects together. You're going to get the quick money influx of the smaller berry style plants combined with the larger but higher capacity of the fruit trees. And as your food forest grows, the really nice thing about that is that the fruit trees will start to shade out everything beneath them so that your square footage is really going to be maximized by the high capacity producers like a tree. Similarly, on the other side, in the first couple years before the trees are developed, there's enough light to get a big flush of growth of these strawberries so that they can really quickly return value to you and really leverage their strength of a quick multiplying but maybe lower capacity money provider for you. And again, when I'm talking about money providing, I'm talking about two potential things: you selling at a market, or just simply you eating the stuff that you would otherwise be buying. A penny saved is a penny earned. Okay, so let's talk about the ROI and investment of the herbaceous layer. And I'm going to use an example of strawberries because it's the best one that I know, and I believe it's probably the best example. Now, it'll completely depend on what grows well in your area. For us, strawberries grow really well and they're very cheap because a lot of people produce strawberries. But the weird thing about that is, even though a lot of people grow them, they're expensive as heck in the store and they taste like garbage. So strawberries are a great place to start your food forest because the nutrient difference in what you'll be growing is vastly different. And I'll talk about that later. But also, the cost in the store is expensive and the ease to create them is very, very easy, and they're very, very cheap. They're really one of the single best plants I can think of. Maybe raspberries would be the only other comparable for just how perfect they are for someone to start growing these plants. And again, that completely depends on my economic condition here. Now, for strawberries, you can buy them end of season. Sometimes local nurseries will have auctions, but certainly stores will have end of season sales. So make sure you keep your eye open for stuff like that. But even right in the middle of the season, you can usually buy about 3 strawberry plants for around $20. End of season, you're looking at $1 a plant. So let's even just say we're going to look at about $5 per strawberry plant. So this here is roughly a square foot of strawberries, and just based on my experience picking something around this size, so I would say you're going to get around $1 worth of strawberries per square foot. Now comparing that to the fruit tree, if we look at the fruit tree, has a radius of around 8 feet or so. So the pi r squared, we're looking at roughly like 200 square feet of production space that this peach is occupying. And if I said an average of $200 per year of peaches, like I said earlier, that is also around $1 a square foot. Now, I actually think that it's probably a little higher for the peach, and the peach is also coming into larger production years. I think that overall, a peach tree will outproduce something like strawberries in terms of dollars per square feet, but also keep in mind that underneath the peach tree, I have a lot of other things growing, whereas underneath the strawberry plants, I only have wood chips. So this is really a reason why it's a good idea to plant in 3D polycultures and use that vertical space, because you get more plants in a smaller area, you get more density and diversity. If, for example, the strawberry numbers came out that they were way better than anything else, it shouldn't still mean that you go plant a field of strawberries, because what you're really missing is that time of harvest. You're missing maximizing photosynthesis, and over time those strawberries will probably drain your soils out and they'll produce less and less and less. Whereas if you create a 3D polyculture, then you're going to have as much photosynthesis going into the ground as possible, and your whole system will thrive basically in perpetuity. Raspberries are another extreme example of amazing economics, because you can also get these end of season for $1 per cane, and they'll spread out that you can then sell the canes or just fill in a space. They'll also produce roughly the same amount as strawberries, possibly a little more, because one cane will have around 10 raspberries on it, and it will produce twice in its life. Just another example of planting diversity. I've already emptied all my peaches off my trees, and I've got about another 2 to 3 weeks until I have to start taking some of these pears off the tree. But this pear is absolutely loaded as well. And having all the different types of fruit are going to minimize the chances of having a really bad year, where you have an early frost that maybe hits all your apples, but you're going to still get pears, you're still going to get peaches, raspberries, strawberries. You know, it's just the way that you should be dealing. What is that? That is a chipmunk? That was weird. So it's just always a good idea to plant in diversity. So this was a really long-winded way, and did you expect anything else coming from me, of trying to determine roughly how many dollars per square foot you'll get. And I think if you're going to triple the cost to install based off of a tree, you should roughly expect the same amount of return of surplus. So that means if a tree is giving you roughly $1 per square foot back, then I think if you triple that and you're getting $3 per square foot, that's going to ballpark you for where you're going to be for pulling money back out of a 3D polyculture system, around $3 per square foot. So if we then say that a tree is around $60, $65, we triple that for the install costs of the entire guild, you're looking about $200. And if we look at the square footage of this tree, it's around 200 square feet. So the numbers are all kind of lining up and making a lot of sense. So now we're going to be looking at spending roughly $1 a square foot to install a food forest on average, ballpark, and we're going to be pulling in roughly $3 per square feet when we have the whole thing installed. And importantly, if you're installing something that's giving you a crop like strawberries as the ground cover layer, then you're going to be getting roughly $1 a square foot back from the strawberries after the very first year. So that means that in general, you're looking at an ROI of 1 year, maybe a little longer, maybe 2, somewhere between 1 and 2 years for your investment of a food forest guild to return that back in terms of saved food. That's a pretty good ROI. And then you're going to have roughly the rest of your life as a passive income stream, bringing in around $3 per square foot. Okay, now in work or in school, whenever you do any kind of calculation like this, it's always good to take a minute, step back, and do like a sanity check on that calculation. Does that kind of make sense based on your observations? You know, if you're solving a math problem that tells you that an elephant weighs 5 pounds, then maybe you do the sanity check and then you know that you messed up somewhere because an elephant doesn't weigh 5 pounds. So in this, I'm saying that it costs you around $1 per square foot to install a food forest guild. And I can probably say that that is a drastic overestimate of how much it can cost you if you want to be dollar conscious. If you want to get sales at the end of the year, or you want to buy in bulk, get together with a bunch of people, you can find really good deals and cut that cost at least in half. In terms of the money in, getting $1 per square foot, getting $3 per square foot out of an area in a dense 3D polyculture guild, I'd say that that's pretty close. That's pretty close to what I'm experiencing myself, and that's based on my food prices in my store. I really, really want to get an important point across right now, though. What I'm buying in the store, it ain't what I'm producing. The fruit that I'm buying in a store, when I'm comparing my prices, even the organic fruit, it's largely grown in monocultures. It's grown in very resource extracting systems. It's grown in dead soils. It's fertilized, even if using organic fertilizers. There has been research done that shows that a carrot that we eat today is less nutritious than a carrot that our grandparents ate. And it all speaks to the way that we grow food now. We grow food using fertilizers to bloat the food up, and we grow it in dead soil and dead ecosystems. And the food that we eat, even if you're buying healthy, fresh veggies from a store, the food that you're buying is nutrient depleted compared to what you can produce in a small area especially. Make sure that you understand one thing. No large-scale farming operation can possibly touch the production per square foot that you will get out of a small urban backyard. You will crush what I can do here because I'm just dealing with a larger footprint and I'm one person. So there's no way that production per square foot, especially when you're talking nutrients in the food per square foot, I can't touch what you're going to do in a small urban backyard. Nobody can. The stores certainly cannot. So why do we buy food? We buy food to nourish ourselves. We buy food to keep us going. And if you're going to just compare an apple that you buy in a store compared to an apple that you grow at home, you might be able to technically buy that apple in the store for cheaper. But it still makes financial sense to install your own food forest because you recoup the cost of the initial investment and then it becomes a passive income stream. No matter what, that's going to beat going to the store and buying something constantly. Even if you're getting an apple for a penny, it still makes sense to plant your own trees. It just so happens that fruit trees are some of the best possible investments that a human being can make. But nothing will touch the amount of nutrients that you can pull out of a system, especially when you're following my soil building principles. So if you're growing in a 3D polyculture, what really matters is nutrients per square foot and comparing that to the nutrients in the food at the store. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to come up with those numbers because that's really, really complicated. But science has been done that shows that the food that we're eating now is way less nutritious than what our grandparents ate. So if what matters to you is how much nutrient, food, and fuel you're putting into your body, then there's no way that you can possibly touch a food forest ecosystem. It makes sense economically. It really, really makes sense nutrient-wise. So if you're looking at some of these numbers that I put out in today's episode and you're comparing that to, oh, I can buy a bag of carrots for $1 on sale at, Costco. Well, you can, but how much nutrients are you getting versus how much nutrients can you get at home? And if it makes sense to buy a bag of carrots that cheap, then maybe you should focus your nutrient building elsewhere. Like I say in many videos. It's important that we buy our calories, but we grow our nutrients. I think that is kind of what makes smart economic sense. So you can grow rice if you really want to, if you want to say that you grow your own rice and you have your own rice paddies. I don't know. Maybe just buy your rice and grow your greens and grow your fruit. Grow your fruit and veggies and focus on buying your calories. I think that just makes the most amount of sense for someone who is strapped in terms of how much space they have. If you want to grow potatoes, because that's just something you want to do, go ahead and do it. But if you want to make the most financially out of your small ecosystem of a backyard, then what you want to do is fruit, veggies, and mushrooms. You want to grow those sweet, delicious, healthy, expensive mushrooms. Now, the last cost that you should factor into all of this is the brown stuff. It's the mulch. Now, this is going to be impossible for me to say anything on because it's going to vary drastically. If you're in a heavily human population area that has been deforested for a very long time, like say Great Britain or something like that, it's going to be very expensive for you to bring in wood chips. If you're in an area like me, surrounded by forest everywhere and power lines where trees are constantly being cut down, then I can get these wood chips completely for free. There's a huge difference in the cost of these things. So try to source local organic matter. It doesn't have to be wood chips. It can be straw, it can be hay, it can be sawdust, it can be whatever is cheap, easy for you to get. It could even be palm leaves. It could be anything. Whatever's cheap and easy for you to get. What matters is you're putting organic material down on the ground to protect the soil life. Wood chips just last a really long time. They're really good and they're free and abundant here. That's why I use wood chips, but use whatever you have available. However, factor that into the cost because it could impact how long it takes your plants to pay themselves off. I would say even if you're buying wood chips, it's going to increase your ROI from maybe 1 to 2 years to 2 to 4 years, say ballpark. But that's a very, very short ROI. It's a great investment, even at that level, because then after you're paid off, if you use perennial systems, you use perennial food, and you plant in a 3D polyculture, it's going to create a passive income stream that's going to exist for the rest of your life. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you on the next one. Plus, how cool is it to be able to do something like this? It's unbelievable. So good.